Hello, my lovely friends. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Yani, and we are going to be starting off today's video with a little bit of a joke. What did the bookworm tell her friend when she found out she had never read Fitzgerald? You got to be kidding me.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Okay, don't hate me. Don't hate me. I had to get that out the way. I had to lighten the mood. This is the second time I'm recording this video, and the audio just did not exist in the first one. So here we are again, and I had to say that, not just to lighten the tone, but also to kind of segue into today's topic, which is everybody's favorite topic, and that is classic literature. We all know what I'm talking about. We're talking Jane Eyre, Frankenstein, 1984, like the classics. And I've spoken with a lot of newer readers, and overwhelmingly, the feedback that I receive is that the classics are a little bit intimidating. And sincerely, I understand why. Most of us, we weren't born with this ability to understand the classics. Most of us had humble roots with Wattpad. Personally, I didn't start reading classic literature until like middle school, and even then it was the easier sort of classic literature. I mean, there's definitely tiers as far as difficulty. And even now into my adult age, I read it whenever I'm interested in it, but it's not the majority of what I read. Really, I'll pick it up when I have interest. Most recently, I read East of Eden and The Bluest Eye because those were interesting to me. I'm not deterred by something being a classic the way that some other people are. And I think schools have a lot to do with this as well, and the approach that a lot of formal education has taken to introduce the general population into some serious text. I mean, no wonder there's this big negativity kind of associated with it. Most of the time I speak with people and I ask them, like, why don't you like classic literature? And it's not even that they don't like it, but if they do have something against it, it's usually because of the way it was taught in school. But say I do meet people who have interest in it and love to read and would love to read more classic literature, and they make an effort, and then they get tired. A lot of people said they get sleepy, they get bored as well. In my case, when I first started reading classic literature, I got headaches. So there's definitely things that can come from it, and this has a lot to do with the language that's used. The majority actually is in Old English, which would require its own separate specialized dictionary to fully understand, and sometimes it's just not worth it, or it doesn't feel worth it, and all these things are a big deterrent to people. But I do strongly believe that anybody who loves literature and is trying to grow in their love and understanding of literature should read classics, because you have to really understand the roots of something to be able to appreciate it. It's the same way you get into a relationship and your relationship's defined by the present, but you want to know about this person's childhood and upbringing because it helps you understand them better. And with classic literature, it has laid so much of the foundation for modern stories that you really are helping yourself and helping your understanding of different entertainments, even in understanding these contexts that this literature provided essentially. But I understand that it is and can be a very daunting task, especially if school has kind of ruined it for you. So I'm making this video for you. For you, my gift to you, the individuals who want to read more classic literature and just don't know where to start as far as how they can even begin to get into it, because they make an effort and it's just an unsuccessful effort. And this video is for you if that's you. Love it or hate it, there is a reason that classics are most of what is taught in education. It's important. You can never say it's not important. I think there's a bigger discussion that we should have about the way we teach literature in public schools and in university as well, because although the quality of education gets, or should get, better when you go into a university, then there's conversations about how right is it that we are essentially gatekeeping these conversations and these intellectual, seminars that are helping formulate smart people and put smart people out there. Is it right that it's behind a paywall? That's a separate conversation that we can have, but most of the time, most of us are not going to some Ivy League program to learn the foundations and importance of literature. And that's not our fault. I'm sure many of us would if we could, and not everyone. It's again, it's a conversation that we can have. I have seen videos of people who are attempting to read, for example, the Oxford Literature Department's reading list, which is awesome. I think that's something that would be very fun to do. But how do you even get to that point? All of this to say, what do you do if you want to read more literature, if you want to connect with literature, classic literature, the way you see others do, and you want to cement your understanding of the text and just have all this context? What do you do if you really want to, but you're struggling because it's just a daunting task? There's obviously tons of shortcuts that you can take. You could have ChatGPT print you an extensive outline, but I encourage you to try to develop this skill, because you don't want to be relying on an external force to confirm what you're reading. You want to actually read to understand. The good news is that reading classics, much like reading anything else or doing anything else, gets easier the more that you do it. So, thankfully, or maybe unthankfully, depending on your perspective, one of the things that you just have to do when it comes to reading classic literature and getting better at it is just start. The more you do it, the easier to get, the more accustomed your brain will get to the way of writing and the way of speaking. But of course, what do you do when you've already started and you're just like falling asleep? So first and foremost, I do recommend that you start with the modern classics. Technically, there is no official definition of a classic. I have looked in ample places in preparation for this video, but I did find a definition from Masterclass, which defines a classic as the following. In order for a book to achieve true classic status, it must achieve a level of excellence or enduring cultural relevance that most new books can never obtain. That's almost word for word the definition. That is a lot of books when you think about it, and most of those books, are from a very long time ago, but a good amount of them aren't from that long ago either. And there's more books now than have ever existed in history. That's just an obvious fact, because we published and then we keep publishing, so the quantity will always increase. Now we have things like social media, we have things like a digital footprint, so there's definitely more books that may become classics than were classics in the past, but it's still a very small margin of books that actually are able to achieve that endurance cultural impact that this definition mentioned. If you want to read classics, of course, you can just jump right in and be very ambitious, read Beowulf, read the Canterbury Tales, some of the earliest novels known, but that might be difficult. So I do recommend that if you are struggling with reading classics a little bit, that you start with the modern day and work yourself backwards. You could do a quick YouTube search or a TikTok search if you're a short form content kind of person, and you're gonna get recommended a lot of modern classics, or what people believe are modern classics. And you see a couple of books that tend to come up quite often. Books like The Secret History by Donna Tartt, A Little Life, We Have Always Lived in the Castle, Shirley Jackson, Bluest Eye. I really recommend that you start with this century, and then from that point on, work your way backwards to maybe like the 20th century. Read books like The Great Gatsby, The Catcher in the Rye, The Outsiders. Something that can also be sort of grouped into this category is to read children's literature as well. So I say children's literature because we recognize them now as children's stories. I'm not sure to the extent that they actually are children's stories, or they're just classics with the kid as the main narrator, but there's tons of stories that are technically for a younger audience that are still classics, like A Little Princess, The Secret Garden, Treasure Island. Check these out. They're just as good of a story, and sometimes they're a little bit easier to understand with maybe some shorter chapters because they're tailored to a younger audience. They're still classics, so it's really worth also checking those out if you're trying to improve your strength in reading them. This next tip that I have may be a little bit controversial depending on the kind of person that you are, but I recommend that you watch the adaptation first. Some people think that's horrible, you know, you're basically spoiling yourself. I don't care about that. And if you do, you know, don't do this tip. Do the other two tips, but this one is really one that helped me when I was trying to overcome these challenges. Watch the movie, watch the play, understand the story before you read the story. Already know what's gonna happen, already know the characters, already know the course of the narrative. So when you're actually reading it, you're spending less time being confused. One of the ways that I utilized this to help me understand and get better with classic literature was by watching a lot of the Barbie movies. Barbie, Princess and the Pauper, immaculate cinematic masterpiece. Did you know it was based on a book by Mark Twain? A lot of the Barbie movies are based on classics. And that's just Barbie, you know, there's tons of movies and plays and shows that are based off classic stories. You have some of the more obvious ones like Pride and Prejudice. You have some that are more discreet like Peter Pan, right? Disney too. So whatever you have to do to watch and intake the original story. Granted, it may not be a perfect adaptation. You may want to do some research, especially if you're looking to have a faithful telling, but this really is a concrete way that you can familiarize yourself with the story so that you're not spending the majority of the time with a headache, bored, trying to figure out what is happening. You already know, and you can focus your energy on understanding themes and complexities and language, which will aid you for the next time. Then you can read it and watch it again. The last tip that I recommend if you really want to start reading more classics and struggle with it is to read the retellings. There are a lot of retellings, books that have taken inspiration from these classic stories, put their own twist on it. Those are fun, and that's a way that you can consume the story to be able to understand the narrative without fully spoiling yourself. A lot of these stories do take creative liberties, and that's okay. That still gives you something new to intake when you read the source material, but at least you will have an understanding already. Some examples that I can think of: The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I read that before I read the Iliad. And trust me, I don't know that I would have been able to get through the Iliad if I hadn't read that story. And there's just so many stories that are based on other stories. You know, I read The Wrath and the Dawn back in high school, and then I read Arabian Nights. That was fun, and it wasn't direct, you know, but I got the gist, you know, and it really helped my understanding. So retellings, you know, another one that I can think of, Hafsika Shadows. I read that. That helped me to understand more of Arthurian legend, even though they're not correlated. It's very loosely inspired by. It's actually taking on a narrative and perspective of someone that's not very prominent in the overall grand scheme of the stories, but I got a lot of context there, and it made it so much more fun. So definitely I feel like checking out retellings is a great way to ease into classics because you're able to have an idea of themes and significance before going in. So that is it for this video, friends. I really hope that you have taken something away from here. I hope that if you are struggling to get into classic literature or just struggling with getting yourself absorbed or just understanding it, that you will take these tips and feedback and, you know, be able to apply it to your reading. You know, basically start with modern classics, work backwards through time, even start with children's classic literature as well. Watch the adaptation. There's absolutely no shame in it. You can also read the retellings, which is personally my favorite way of preparing for a story that maybe I'm intimidated by. But also, sorry if at any point this seems a little bit rushed. This is my second time trying to film this video. The very first time, the audio just completely did not pick up. And then I started refilming and I kept getting interrupted every other sentence because I ran out of space and I keep having to go on my phone, delete space. I think I delete enough and I don't. So it's constant, stopping and recording and stopping, which has disrupted my flow. And I really hope that that hasn't impaired the quality of this too much. And I still hope that you were able to intake some of this tips that I have for you. Please, I hope that you guys will stick around. I hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite classic literature is and the steps that you took to get yourself comfortable with it, if that's something that you did, or your favorite retellings or adaptations that other people might watch to get themselves excited and amped and prepared to take on some of these more difficult texts. But I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day or night, depending on when you're watching this, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.